Hi, welcome to the very first episode of my podcast, You Can Scream With Us. I'm your host, Mihika, also known as Fatal Final Girl on Instagram and Substack. I'm a writer and a huge horror fan. You Can Scream With Us is a weekly podcast where I talk about horror movies and movies that were not marketed as horror, but the plot points or characters or motivation behind the film managed to scare the crap out of me. Today we are going to be talking about Green Room. This is your official spoiler alert, so if you haven't seen it and you don't want spoilers, go check it out and then come back here to hang out with me. So, I watched Green Room years ago, and since the day that I watched it, it remains at the forefront of my mind whenever I'm speaking to a fellow horror fan. I absolutely love this movie. It's a film that I've returned to time and time again. It's gritty and grimy and completely uncomfortable, and it's kind of why I love it. When it comes to the genre of horror, it's really wonderful in that you can have really varied discussions with fellow fans because there is a breadth of story options and there are a variety of creators that are pushing past formulas that can sometimes burden other movie genres. I am typically someone that leans away from supernatural horror. I think that there is something so visceral and bone-chilling about a human or a group of humans that decide to inflict terror upon others. These types of stories just burrow into my psyche and really unlocks a sub-basement of fear for me. On the other hand, I can get why people fuck with supernatural horror more. A good ghost or demon story is really nothing to be mad at. The movie begins with a group of 4 bandmates. They're in their early 20s and they are absolutely not the most responsible group of people. We see them siphoning gas for their van. Something that I can respect is that the group is remarkably resourceful, and it's a good beginning, especially when you consider how many casts in horror movies are stocked with some of the dumbest fucking people you'll ever encounter in cinematic history. The beginning of the movie rapidly establishes their unity as a group. This is a group of friends that create music together, and their familiarity with one another is apparent and feels really organic. They're musicians who are just trying to make their dreams become a reality, but much like so many artists in the world, their funds and resources are in short supply. There is an interesting moment that I really identified with when I was first watching. They speak about how the internet can dilute artistry, and I thought it was a really poignant thought and a worry that I think many creative people can relate to. We see them play a diner with an audience of maybe 2, and the person that helped them book this shitty job helps them book another. They ask about the venue, and we learn with them that they will be playing for a group of right-wing people. The next day, they're pulling into the venue, and I was scared from this moment on. First off, the bar is filthy. The walls are covered in right-wing slogans and swastikas. There is a Confederate flag in the green room. It's immediately unsettling and disgusting, and the band decides to make a slightly reckless but absolutely hilarious and fantastic power move, and they perform a song where they basically tell the entire group of bar patrons to fuck off. Somehow, they're able to make it through the rest of their set alive, and they're making their way back to the green room when they see that their belongings were placed in the hallway before it. They're told that this was done to make space for the headliner. As they're preparing to leave, Sam, the guitarist, remembers that her phone was left back in the room, and Pat, the bassist, I believe, or maybe a fellow guitarist, says that he will retrieve it for her. When he enters the room, he sees that there is a woman that has been stabbed in the fucking temple. She's lying on the floor, and there are a few men sitting off on the sides of the room. There is also another woman, Amber, who is alive and in tears, and she asks Pat to call the police. Just for some context, the men that work at this establishment have like a solid 40 pounds on every member of this band. Pat acts quickly and he makes a call to the police. One of the men tries to physically stop him and he manages to escape his grasp. He rushes out of the room and his bandmates follow him immediately. I have to say, I really appreciate these moments because it would have been so easy to have that frustrating element of so many suspenseful movies where one character is flailing or trying to do something and they have another character buzzing around them like a mosquito, asking for the reasoning behind their actions. I'm not saying that the questions and the prodding isn't justified in some scenarios, because it absolutely is, but sometimes I just want the character to follow suit and cover someone and maybe ask questions once we're out of danger. One of the men in charge of this bar brandishes a gun and tells the group to re-enter the room with the deceased girl in it. We know, and the band knows, that they are in a clusterfuck of a situation. I also knew that this entire scenario was going to funnel itself into a toilet bowl because 911 calls back and the man in charge leaves the room to take the call. Don't trust these squirrely bastards if, God forbid, you find yourself as a witness to a dead body in a white supremacist bar. I'll be honest though, I'm too brown for this. I would have been hate crimed by now. The group is essentially sequestered in the room. There are men from the club with them and they reek of just pure imbalance. What really struck me in this scene was how claustrophobic it felt without shoving the camera into the actor's personal space. The filmmakers really did an impeccable job of showing a rapid tightening of survival options without making any overt or dramatic visual choices. During this time, Sam suggests that the dead girl may not be dead, and this freaking cuckoo all-right man with crazy eyes goes over to the dead girl and clutches the handle of the knife that is jutting out of her head and moves her body using the handle to showcase how dead she is. It is beyond disturbing, and it really captures the type of grotesque pleasure some people get seeing fear as a response to their actions. The band is justifiably freaked out. They're told to stay in place by a man that is wielding a revolver and continues to threaten them with it. While this is occurring, we see a stabbing being staged outside between two different bar patrons and we hear sirens. So at this point, the call to the police is officially taken care of. It is also at this moment that Xavier from X-Men shows up, except here he is the big boss man and he is absolutely not here to save the fucking day. Darcy is the big boss, aka Professor X, and his second in command and the person that has been sailing this sinking ship thus far is Gabe. Gabe is the same person who answered the 911 return call and has been trying to cover the tracks of the crime thus far. We see Darcy and Gabe going through the band's truck while they're still being held in the room, and at this point we can only begin to imagine how screwed they are. The band is getting increasingly agitated and scared, and they decide that they want to leave. Tensions are rising between them and the gunmen until Darcy and Gabe instruct the gunmen through the door to give them the gun but to remove the bullet. The gun is handed to Sam, however the group is very wary of letting the gunmen, or I guess the gunless men, whose name is Big Justin, out, and Reese, the drummer, who is also slightly temperamental but not in an unjustified way, stands between the door and Big Justin. Sam she's got a great gut feeling and is one of the only female characters that makes complete sense. And after a few moments of Darcy attempting to convince them that they want no one else to get hurt, the singer of the band, and seemingly the most precious of them all thus far, Tiger, jumps on Big Justin and Reese follows suit. Reese subdues him and they pull the bullets out of his pocket and load the gun. Can I just say, I am deeply grateful for Reese. I feel like I'm the emotional Reese for the people I love, but I do not have any useful wrestling skills that would help me in a bind like this. As a whole, this group of young people are not weak or limp or cowards in any way, shape, or form. They're probably one of my favorite casts that I've ever seen in a horror movie. Next, we see the band members trying to find a means of escape, and then the lights go out. Darcy announces to bar customers that the night is over, and we see the grounds drain of people with only a few remaining. Darcy is a master manipulator. He has a PhD from the University of Gaslighting with a minor in I'm sorry you feel that way. He is awful. He convinces the band to give him the sole gun they possess with a pretty flimsy explanation that it is unregistered and he just wants it out of the picture. He also informs the group that the police arrived and left. This was a pivotal moment in the movie in that it was their second significant mistake. The first was playing at this establishment to begin with, but they also made $6 each at their last show, so judge them how you like, I won't judge you for how you feel about them. Pat gets his arm sliced into ribbons within the process of handing over the gun, and the room erupts into utter chaos. Reese struggles with Big Justin, and Amber slits his stomach wide open, and a significant threat to their life is now dead. Earlier on, Tiger had noticed light emitting from the floorboards, and the group is able to smash through the floor, and they enter a heroin lab that has no feasible exit. Reese is definitely useful and courageous, but there is a nearly invisible line between bravery and stupidity, and he decides he wants to leave. Sam resists, but they carry forward with Reese anyways, and without a proper game plan or idea of what their movements will be once they leave this room. Every single inch of my body was in pain watching them exit without a plan. Oh, this hurt my feelings, and I felt like my life was in peril. It's only when they've all stepped out into the hallway that one of them thinks to ask Amber how many exits there are. I cannot. A very scary looking dog enters the bar, and he goes for my favorite character, Tiger, and I am just the saddest. This is also where so much goes to shit because the group scatters. God forbid you find yourself in a horror movie situation, but this is not crocheting. This is a group activity. If we are screwed, we are all screwed together. Our second death is Reese, who jumps out of a window and is stabbed to death. Our three remaining characters are Sam, Pat, and Amber, and they head back to the room where all of this shit started. As the movie progresses, we learn that Emily, the girl who was stabbed initially, was planning to leave with her partner Daniel. When one of the members of this alt-right association learned of this, he murdered her. Daniel volunteers to enter the bar after Darcy lies, telling the people that he's assembled that one of the band members killed Emily. Sam, Pat, Amber, and Daniel speak after he manages to break into the room and he learns of the truth. They try to leave together again, and both Daniel and Sam die. Pat and Amber know that their back is up against the wall, and this time they're actually prepared for the fight of their lives. They set up a trap for the people who come, they use their weapons and resources at their disposal purposefully, and these moments were so fucking satisfying to watch. It ends with them killing Darcy and the majority of his crew while they were in the middle of staging a crime scene. Oh, Green Room. This movie is something else. I think for me, it hits especially hard because it contains very specific fears of mine. There is, of course, white supremacy. There's also a really, really filthy environment, and then there is dogs. Yes, I am afraid of dogs a little bit. I was bitten by a little tiny dog as a kid, and when I say as a kid, I mean as a young teenager, and I'm still a little bit of a wimp around them. The use of them as a weapon in the movie was extremely disturbing. I know that it's not a new concept, animals have been weaponized for forever, but it was stomach churning, and it doesn't help that my favorite character died after having his throat ripped out by one. What is particularly interesting about Green Room is that we see the desperation of survival and the cold calculation of hunting as scenes move between these two groups of people. When you take in the precision of the evil force in the movie and soak in the stark contrast with the understandable thrashing that accompanies self-defense in an environment where every odd is stacked against you, it's terrifying, but it's not presented in a way where it's defeating. There's spirit in every character. A standout moment, or maybe better described as a moment that is seared into my memory, is when Pat has his arm completely sliced and diced. Prosthetic artists are just truly the finest form of artistry, and there's no better medium to showcase their talent than horror. It's interesting because so much of the film happens in the green room itself, and so you feel confined, and for the elements of the outdoors that are shown with the group of villainous murderers outside, you can see the isolation. I just find it fascinating because you can be simultaneously confined and isolated, but if you're isolated, it doesn't necessarily mean you're confined. You know what I'm saying? In general, I found the visuals to be fantastic. I love the aesthetic of the movie. The haze of the green room, the lush forestry once they're outside, everything worked really brilliantly and it flowed really well within the story. You know what actually drew me to this movie to begin with? It was a poster. It's Pat holding the machete and he's captured mid-motion with the blade swung behind his head as if he's preparing to cut something with momentum. There are tones of rich green. I just thought it looked really interesting and I'm really glad I wasn't wrong. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of the movie and what some of your favorite moments were. I don't know if there is a cult following for it now, but I think it's one of the rare movies that is deserving of one. It's a unique story with a solid script, and the actors are all performing at their best. Now, to close out the podcast, I have a couple segments for you. So on every podcast, I will be sharing a scary fact as well as a horror-esque word of the week. To start off this podcast, I'm going to share a Canadian scary fact because I'm Canadian myself. So, in Niagara Falls, there is a tunnel called the Screaming Tunnel. The name itself just paints its location as a dream destination. There are a few tales attached to this tunnel. Some say that a girl's clothes caught on fire and she tragically died there. Others say she was set on fire in the tunnel by her father. Unsurprisingly, this place has become a scary tourist attraction, and people visit late into the night and light a match and wait for it to extinguish with the hope that they summon the spirit of the girl and they hear her scream. I also saw that some people say that the match is snuffed out by the screams of the spirit. But either way, you could not catch me hanging out there. I have been to Niagara Falls like 1,001 times at this point. It was like the go-to place for a day trip with my family, but I've never heard of this place, so this was a fun fact for me to learn. Alright, now for the horror word of the week. This week's word is sepulchral. According to Oxford Languages, sepulchral means relating to a tomb or interment or gloomy or dismal. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic week. Stay safe and don't do anything too scary because the world is a scary enough place as it is. If you like this episode, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you did not like this episode, please still like, share, maybe don't comment, but please do subscribe. I'm also now on Substack, so if you want to read some funny essays on the many types of hell that I've been trying to navigate as a problematic introvert, I would definitely appreciate your support there. I'm also on Instagram, so you can follow me there if you like. I'll put all the links in the bio, and I'll see you next Friday. I gotta go now. Bye!